Public Works Superintendent. I actually brought with me a couple of guys from the top department. Bob Hurdle, who is our forester, certified arborist on staff. Some of you have probably seen him around town before. And the other gentleman with me there, that's Matty Gilbert, an aspiring arborist. He is almost done, right? So coming close to get his arborist certification. So when we get into this a little bit, maybe we'll have a little Q&A, a little discussion, and get a little dialogue going on this. So just a quick overview. We are a Tree City USA community, since 1995. We've been doing this for a long time. Tree City USA standards include the operation of a forestry department, protection of trees through a tree preservation ordinance, implementation of a comprehensive community forestry program, and a proclamation observing Arbor Day. These we meet every year. There's also a few other standards that there's questions in there that they ask. The budgetary items, how much we spend per capita. We well exceed in Lake Bluff on that. So this is something, I do this every year. There's an application I fill out. I go through they give them some statistics. I send a picture every year of our Arbor Day celebration with, we usually do with the Garden Club and over at the rec center. So the operation of our forestry department, really our objective is the management of public trees and private trees. We have over 6,000 trees in our inventory currently. That goes up and down with removals and plantings every year. It's updated regularly. In 2020, we spent 2,800 plus man hours in forestry alone. That is actually where we spend most of our time in the Public Works Department. The next closest was in streets at 1,500 hours. So we spend, basically, it's just about one guy working forestry 8 hours a day, every day for a working year. Some of our activities are monitoring the assessment of trees, the tree preservation ordinance, spent a lot of time processing permits in that area, trimming, planting, and removals. During the year, we try and, we kind of have a goal of setting to trim 100 trees. We usually hit about 75, 78 trees a year. Plantings, we do about 20 a year currently, and removals are as needed. So a little history on the tree preservation ordinance, and they actually had to do a little research with this on Drew, because prior to a certain year, prior to 2008, when our tree ordinance became very robust, I actually didn't have very much involvement in the tree ordinance because I wasn't in that department at the time. So in 1994 up to 2008, in our research, we found there was definitely a tree ordinance, but it was limited in protection and size. And from what we could gather from what we read was that it obviously clearly protected our street trees, parkway trees, and then 10 feet into your property. After that, your yard was pretty much fair game. But there were some caveats in there. There was a 50% rule when activities were done over a 24-month period. But if you had 2 trees, you could just have 1. It wasn't very tight. Our current ordinance started in 2008. Our current ordinance is pretty tight, and it's pretty in-depth. Tree removals require permit application. And since 2008, we've done over 2,000 permit applications. We spend a good chunk of our time actually in forestry chasing these down. I think our highest year, and a lot of it had to do with when we were in the heavy throes of EAB, we did over 392 permits that year. That's a lot, and if you figure each permit might take an hour and some take longer, that's a lot of time we spend out in the field doing that. In my time too, I've had 18 violation letters, which it's typically, there's 2 ways. One, somebody cut a tree down without permission. Usually it just turns out like typically it's a dead tree and they didn't understand. I thought I could take a dead tree down. That happens. Sometimes people will take down a live tree illegally, and also will send, if we get a neighbor complaint of a dead tree in a yard, we can usually you end up just talking to that resident, and it usually gets resolved pretty quickly, taken down. Doesn't really escalate to the letter too often, but it has. But usually, I would say everybody's very compliant on that. A lot of times sometimes you're just pointing it out. People have some big yards in Lake Bluff, big backyard. They won't even know they have a dead tree in the back of their yard until somebody points it out to them. Some of our objectives of the tree preservation ordinance. This is kind of text heavy here, but and some of the things that our tree ordinance helps with the Village of Lake Bluff to stabilize valuable topsoil and preventing and minimizing unnecessary soil erosion, assist in proper stormwater runoff to decrease costs associated with flooding, protect the important link in the hydraulic cycle that trees provide through transpiring of water and the neutralization of waste that pass through the groundwater table and other aquifers, aid in the reduction of air pollution through the removal of harmful carbon dioxide and the generation of oxygen, provide a buffer and screen against noise pollution, restore to the greatest extent possible denuded soil that results from construction and grading work accompanying development, provide a haven and nesting area for birds, insects, and other forms of wildlife that are essential to maintain the food chain and help control and eliminate disease-carrying mosquitoes, reduce energy consumption through the windbreak and shade effects of trees, protect and increase property values in a manner that maintains each property owner's enjoyment of his or her property, conserve and enhance the village physical and aesthetic environment, particularly its valuable natural and rural atmosphere, provide important psychological and emotional benefits to residents and other persons within the village, eliminate trees that constitute a threat, danger, or nuisance to the public or to property of the village, or that may be dangerous to the health or other trees and vegetations in the village, and protect and enhance the quality of life and the general welfare of the village and its residents. Which that just opens our ordinance. Like I said, our ordinance is pretty robust. We have a strong tree ordinance. And I even remember when it was implemented in 2008, thinking to myself, like, wow, this is going to be a lot of work for the Village of Lake Bluff to keep up with this. This is not an easy task. But we found over the years that we are able to keep up with most of everything that happens in the forestry department. We get a little behind, but as far as the ordinance works, I think it was just kind of a learning curve in general, just getting used to how it worked and how everything worked along with the ordinance, especially when it came to construction and removal for additions and the building of houses. So in the operations department, so some of the things in our operations with monitoring and assessment. In our current practice, we have our inventory that was created around 1994, 95. It's regularly updated. It's how we know what everybody's got at their house, honestly. I mean, we kind of, every tree has an ID number and associated with what you read it like a book, left to right, F1, F2, F3, F4. Some people just have F1, F2, some people have F1, some people go as far as if the back of their house is the other road, they have B1, B2, B3, L1, L2 for a corner lot. So some of our planned action and something we can look for in the future is to seek grant for inventory update and or new technology software, and maybe integrate this with our GIS system. One of the things I think I'm really more interested in anything else in that section would be software and updated software. Currently, it's in an Access database. And when we got a new computer just recently, it didn't have Access on it. I had to ask for it because I needed to get back into my program. So apparently the Public Works Department is the last people using Access. Which is, I can manipulate the program. I know Bob can get through it pretty good, but it will get lost in translation over the years. So I think investment in software is probably a strong idea for us. Preservation and protection. Enforce regulations and treatments as needed. And our planned action for the future, we're going to continue to do that. Enforcement of our regulations, obviously, when people call about dead trees, it's also like when we're going out, we get tree permit applications. Anybody watching, listening right now, typically we do those on Wednesdays. So when you turn one in, Wednesday's your day. And tree treatments. We did some for EAB. We have, what is it, cottony maple scale outside, which is gonna be treated on the trees. And we used to spray for gypsy moth. And I don't know if anybody lived in the village at that time, but it was aerial sprayed. So we did different areas. Fortunately, I think we're in a point, the gypsy moth has moved on from this area. So I think we're okay. I haven't seen any signs of it. We haven't had any complaints or any bulletins from the USDA. So I think we're in good shape there. Aerial spraying was not fun.
I got one.
You have a
found one gypsy moth.
Oh, so I mean, it's not unstoppable. You know, I mean, you know, it can be taken care of. We used to spray it. It's like a soapy mixture. You can actually, it's like a combination of water and dish soap. It drowns it, so it won't hatch. But if the numbers are low enough where you don't see the devastation. I mean, you could actually, I can't remember the last year we did, but you could hear them eating in the trees. And we saw them defoliate multiple trees in town in 1 year. So typically a tree can handle one defoliation. The second one is probably not gonna make it through, so. Tree trimming. Currently it's as needed or upon request. We do have in-house grid system on a 6-year cycle, which has been very hard for us to keep up with. Typically though, well not typically, we do prune the high-risk zones every year. So you see the parade route, the bike race, the bike path, trimming back of the bike path, those things, those are hit annually. We're hitting all the time, keeping an eye on it. So moving forward, we'll continue the same process, but the discussion about outsourcing a pruning cycle, which I think would be super beneficial for the village of Lake Bluff. I think it's something that would really help us out, especially in the public works sector, because it's just tough for us to keep up with as many trees. When you figure you got 2 guys in 1 truck and you got 6,000 trees, that's a lot of work for a couple guys to do. Tree planting. Currently, we're doing about 20 a year. That's about what we can get done in a reasonable amount of time, so we don't have to spend the entire spring planting trees. We do have a 50-50 cost share program, not used a lot. We do a few. We've done the community tree sales in the past. The last one we did, I don't think was as popular. We ended up just planting a lot of those trees, which doesn't hurt us, obviously. It's not a bad thing. So moving forward, we can increase the number of trees planted. We set the goal for 500 trees in 5 years, and excuse me, possibly add 75 more trees this year. And we're just taking a quick look at doing that. Maybe having to increase or add a budget line of $7,000 to $8,000 more dollars. It's something we can do. I think it could be pulled from the general fund or taken care of. It's something we can do. Tree removals. Tree removals are pretty standard for us. We remove what we can in-house, and we contract anything out due to size and location. Some stuff is just too big for us to do. Or sometimes in areas it's just a little too complicated. I mean, our aerial truck is working height of 55 feet. In Lake Bluff, we got trees way bigger than that. So sometimes it's just not possible for us to do certain trees. And really, no change there either. That's something that we will continue to do the same way. So now, I mean, I'd like to open up and for discussion, Q&A, get a little dialogue going if anybody has any questions.
I do have a question. We have weather change occurring in our area. We have more water, and we have to deal with that on a different subject. How does that affect our trees? And you say that you replant about 20 trees a year. How does that change? I know that you said also that you want to do an additional 75 trees, but how does that affect our 6,000 trees?
Bob, you coming in? I'm going to bring Bob up. You come on up, answer some questions here.
Well, the benefit of planting more trees, the trees absorb, they take in more water. That's a great benefit.
But what about the added humidity? Is that affecting our tree population, or is that no effect on what we have today?
I couldn't answer that. I mean, that I don't know.
Okay, thank
I
you.
mean, are we seeing some effects of weather change? We might be. I mean, I haven't really gotten any bulletins or anything that's saying anything scientifically, but I know from my own experience here, our springs seem to drag on a little longer, be a little bit colder and a little bit wetter, except for this year. I think the first year we ever went full drought to start the year off. And I think some trees we see in like the crabs with the mold getting in, you get the constant wet in the spring when they mold and, what is it called?
Apple
They get the
scab,
apple
fire
scab, fire blight.
So when the leaf's still closed in the petiole, prolonged wet conditions, cool, fungus forms, leaves come out, you see all the brown blotches on the leaves. Those leaves are solar panels making food for the tree, and you're just limiting how much they can help the tree. So weather-wise, yes, the cool, wet springs prolong. It's very harmful to the trees. And then drought, we're in drought now. Those effects are 5 years minimum. So you say, oh, next year it's better, but those trees, the stress is minimum 5 years.
So from a tree population standpoint, your plan was to have 20 trees. How many trees did we lose this year, let's say?
None.
Of those
Of
planted,
the new planted ones,
Yeah.
correct.
No, but of the existing 6,000,
Oh.
are you renewing or are you able to keep up or?
We're not at a 1-for-1, definitely, no.
we lose on average anywhere from like 40 to 50 trees a year. I mean,
Net?
outside of normal,
Net.
yeah, and I mean, that's not net, that's a total loss
Total
of
loss?
public trees. Net, it's 20 or 30, but the EAB was, devastating. I mean, it took over 500 trees or close to 500, that number. And before that, to pick your event, Dutch elm disease, or, some of those go through and do damage. And then to your point earlier, President Charlo, the weather events that happen now, the type of storms that we experience are so intense that there's many trees that are lost in these storms that are so, the wind events, we've had, straight line winds that have taken out,
July 11th, 2011. I mean, I just can't get that one out of my head. That was one of the worst. I mean,
and I don't know how many trees we lost that
I
day.
think it was, well, we had multiple, so I think that was 75 trees just in that, like, because it was
Single
back to
storm
back
event.
to back to back storms.
So you add those events, you add just the fact that we have older growth forests that, that's not getting younger.
It's coming to an end of its cycle.
Yeah, and so it's, we have a lot of trees, we're losing a lot of mature trees. So the idea of planting more and taking greater care of through these changed actions that you would see you all will see them as part of the budget. When we bring that forward come, I guess, January, you'll see those programs. Other than what we're talking about now is going ahead and trying to find a way to plant another 75 trees or so to try to get to that 100 for this first year, working with, Mickey's been kind enough to offer up some help and assistance, gathering some folks to get some more trees in the ground. And right now, worst case scenario, if the goal is to acquire 75 trees that are from a vendor, most likely a vendor that's called Possibility Place, that grows a very specific type of tree. How would you describe them?
It's a bag tree.
Yeah.
So if you look at a tree like we plant on a regular basis, it's balled and burlap. You lose about 90 to 95% of your root mass for the cutting of the ball. So you transport that tree. So transplant shock is about 1 year per caliper inch. So if you're planting a 2.5-inch tree, you're looking at 2.5 years of transplant shock. A lot of weather changes can happen in there which stress the trees, and that's things you have to worry about. These trees are bag trees. They have 100% of their roots in a bag, and they're smaller. They're smaller caliper trees, but they have all their roots. So they're put in there as a seedling, and they stay in that bag till they're planted. So you dig the hole and you fan out the roots, and then you backfill. So they're smaller, but they have all their roots.
I was gonna say, something we really like about them is 2 guys in a truck can knock out a lot of trees on that. Now, again, you're gonna come home, and that tree's not as big as, say, when we're planting the 2.5-inch tree, and all of a sudden you have a 14-foot tree in your yard. It's not gonna be the same. But these trees, we love them. I don't know how else to put it.
Well, Jake, isn't it also true that it's, when you start with a smaller tree, and like Bob says, when you have 100% of the roots, that the tree, and do you use any, plant starter or root growth, nitrogen, phosphorus, fertilizer? Okay, what I'm talking, the liquid?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
root stimulator, any of that. Fertilizing a young tree, that's been balled and burlapped, or it's very small, that you do not want to fertilize.
Right, but in terms of its growth potential, it's greater with the bag trees, right?
Absolutely,
And they have a lot of native species, I mean, that's their specialty.
yes.
Right, so that's a plus for us too, because I noticed, I was gonna ask you, if you had a diagnosis of the oaks that have been lost on Green Bay Road, was that oak wilt or oak mold, do you know?
The only way to definitively say it's oak wilt, it has to be tested at a lab.
Yeah,
So
it's
they-
just
they-
interesting that those three, they're all the same size.
One of those was the one that got completely defoliated by gypsy moth one year.
Okay,
Those are also one-sided trees. They've been hit pretty hard by ComEd, that's the unfortunate part of the
Right.
power grid system, right? There's nothing we can do about
I
that
know.
one.
Well, I have two-line chestnut borer and one that got snipped by North Shore Gas when they did the main.
Yeah.
So that happens. It just stresses them out.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
two-line chestnut borer is their enemy, that's why you want to prune in the winter. so.
Right. Yep, I know. So,
Any more questions on the board? Joy?
Go ahead, Joy, and I'll follow up.
Do we ever try, just kind of going back to the idea of water and terrain and whatever, do we try to adjust trees that work better in certain terrains? Like, I know certain areas are more wet. Would we try, I know in my yard, I put in a birch where I had a low wet area, because I knew like river birches take up a little more water. I know they don't do well in clay, but it's been doing pretty well. But I know there's certain trees that take up more water. I know there's certain trees that do better in drier areas. Do we kind of account for that when we're putting
Yes.
trees in?
Absolutely. When I go out and look at potential locations for tree planting, proper tree, proper location. So when you look at that, we want to diversify our inventory of trees. So let's not make the mistake of the past from Dutch elm to just plant all ash. That's what happened. Historically, that's what happened. Learn from your mistake. So yes, when I look at a location, if it's a low-lying area, you have to consider, if this is a wet area, find something that is much more adaptable to that location. Absolutely.
We had the pleasure of Mickey Collins talking to us last month about the canopy and this mature canopy that our community benefits so greatly from and enjoys, and the impact of the loss of trees on the mature canopy. And I guess I have two questions. When we're talking about the planting efforts and that the trees are smaller but a higher success rate, how old are these trees? What will the gap be to see a mature canopy replacing the impact on the mature canopy? And is there a plan for, I'm assuming it's gonna be a chunk of time, do we have a plan in place to follow through and watch the progression so we can assure that we're filling the gaps?
that's a good question.
Well, so we still don't, we just can't do, we don't do the one for one. Some areas it just doesn't make any sense to, because some of our town, like honestly, the trees, they're volunteer on Parkway anyway. So you have 4 trees right together. We want to have the trees, 30-foot centers is ideal, right? I mean, just so the spread is correct, so when the 2 trees grow, they don't grow together, and then you've got 2 one-sided trees, and sometimes then you're taking the other one down due to, they look horrible, and they're never gonna, the one-sided tree's never gonna recover
Right.
to fill in completely. For us to have, say, with the lifetime to re-canopy the whole town, well, I think we're always in that state of reforestation. I mean, we are always planting. In the past, I mean, when I first started here, Bob and I think we'd plant 75 to 100 trees a year. But we would spend 2 months doing it. So other things would not get done in the village. And so slowly but surely, the decision was made that we need to be able to, what we can handle comfortably, get done in a timely manner, and then be able to move on. I mean, over the time, Lake Bluff has changed. I mean, there's more events in this town than there's ever been in the past. our resources move over to handle events, or we have aging infrastructure. You know, our resources had, you know, when we were spending all that time planting trees, we weren't spending any time working on sewers. So we would have to switch over. And so I think right now, at the 20 trees per year, and also when you're looking at the 20 trees per year, we're doing 2.5 to 3 inch trees. Some of them, I mean, you can use it as example. We have the London plane tree right out here. I think that's only been in the ground 3 years. That's huge. It's a monster already. So, I mean, and that will continue. And if we really want to go with using these possibility place trees, and the benefit of that, they grow, what is it? They grow faster, the less shock. 2 good examples, or 3 good examples at the church on Scranton. So when we did the tree sale in 2016, that's when those were put in. And I mean, they were, you know, probably that tall in the ground now. I think they're 6 years later, 15 feet tall. So it works well. They work well. Good success rate.
One follow-up, and then I'll give up my floor. Would it help, is there something I know there's a interested party in the community. Is there efforts to get the community involved, other groups in the community involved? And is that, I mean, from a financial standpoint and from a manpower standpoint, is there something we as a board should be thinking about as far as organizing?
So I can answer that, and Mickey, I don't know if you want to offer your assistance on this, but Mickey and I have been talking about this, and the answer is yes. If we can find ways to have, you know, public-private partnerships and take advantage of other groups that are looking for projects, whether it be Rotary or Kiwanis, yes is the answer, that we're going to try to find ways to do that. In fact, the village was just received an award from a grant award of $10,000 that the village put in with our partner Lobola for spending time on the 176 corridor in that corner there. Great. So that was a good news, that we're going to take out buckthorn and put in more plantings, working with Lobola. And as part of that grant program, we've identified Rotary to come in and help plant trees as part of that. So yes, we will continue to seek those out. Again, certain individuals in our community are keenly tree lovers, and so we're going to try to take advantage of those, in the sense that if they're going to offer their time and resources, energy, we're going to say yes, let's partner with you. So
Great to hear.
yep.
Any more questions?
Okay. First of all, you guys do a great job. I mean, for a pretty lean staff, things are looking pretty good. But it looks like we've been planting about 20 a year. It looks like we've been losing about 50, so net 30 loss. Your goal is to have 500 over the next 5 years. That's 100 a year. So I think if I do the math right, that's a positive 350 over the next 5 years. The reason you're able to do this is because you have the bag trees, you're more efficient, and you're not giving up other things for the village. Does that sound right? And you have the budget currently that you need to implement this?
No, but there's money, and there's money in the budget that is set aside for unplanned activities like this, and this is a.
Can you just give me a sense of scale, Drew? Is this $10,000 extra we're looking at?
Less than 10,000.
So we're not spending a whole lot of money on our tree program annually?
No. Other than the labor of, you know, the staff that we have devoted to the programs, in terms of investing in the forest, in terms of planting new trees, again, over time, we've learned that we can't ignore the other assets. You know, this is one of the particular assets. That's why we're suggesting moving in a direction of outsourcing the cyclical trimming work to put our resources. You know, we have highly trained operating engineers that should be spending time on our village infrastructure or water, you know, working valves, working storm sewers and those things, rather than spending time.
Well, and also with the outsourcing, you get the equipment and the climbers and somebody else's insurance policy.
Right, you're shifting risk, and that's a big
Right,
part of it.
shifting
yeah.
risk,
Yeah.
shifting the burden, but also I was going to say, Jake, have you thought about outsourcing some of the planting work too, because you guys are so busy?
We've talked about it, but that's part of it. You know, this whole 5-year 500. If we can get to that
That's
goal,
a lot
there's
of
going to be
trees.
different ways to do it, right?
Right.
And there's going to be. We encounter on a regular basis residents who say, you know, is that what you're planning? You know, like, or don't put something in my yard. So the idea of instant gratification. There's going to be times where we're going to want to put in a larger tree, which takes more time, man hours, and we'll figure those out. But at least what we wanted to do to present this evening is to be responsive to concerns brought about from residents, and from the board and say, here's a way to start moving in this direction today, and we know that we can do 75 trees on our own, worst-case scenario. Ideally, we find Rotary, we find Kiwanis to help us.
Right.
But yes, I think at some point within this 5 year, we'll probably outsource a number of trees.
Well, as far as the small tree goes,
Yeah.
that might help. I planted a small red bud this spring, and it's a third bigger already than it was. And that's what I was kind of getting at, is it is better to start small. The larger caliper trees take longer. It's sleep, leap, sleep, creep, leap.
No
right?
slow grow.
Right, and
Yeah,
so, maybe the best thing to do for the objectors is to have photographic evidence and say, here's a tree that was planted last year or 2 years ago, and look at it now. This was this big, and now it's twice its size, because the bigger the tree, the longer it takes for it to adjust to its environment. I mean, right, transplant shock and just the rooting process is long. Thanks, you guys, that was great.
Thank you.
I just had one last thing. I'm sorry, I know
Small
we're over
questions.
time.
We can move on.
Last thing, just when you guys bring the budget to us with the extra trees and kind of what you'd like to do, I'd love to see the software, the idea of the upgraded software. I'd love to see that in the budget so that we can kind of plan for that. It sounded like if you guys have better software, it'll be easier for you to kind of plan where to put trees and how we're gonna lay things out and just timeframes. So please include that when you bring the budget.
I was going to say that as well. I think we're a tree city. I mean, trees are, I'm a woodworker, so I love proper wood. I love great trees. I grew up in the middle of the trees. This is incredibly important to us. So what you guys are doing is extremely important to our community. So I really thank you on that. And if we can see from you additional software, enhanced software, so that you can have a better time managing our 6,000 trees, that would be great. So thank you very much, the two of you. Before we adjourn, are there any comments from the public? We are late on our schedule, but let's spend the time on that.
Yes.
Vicki Collins, 217 East Scranton. First of all, I just want to say a really big thank you. Thank you, Drew, for jumping on this and helping lead it. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate all your hard work, and I can see that there's a budget crunch here. I mean, they're really trying to deal with a lot. So, however we can help them out, that would be just great. I do want to, I think a couple of you alluded to this idea of the net loss that we're experiencing each year, and so the 500 that we're making a goal is really supposed to be kind of a 500 net gain. And I don't know, things are looking a little dismal out there. There are so many distressed trees that I'm not sure what we're gonna, at the end of this year, how many we'll have lost. But last year was a net over 50, I believe.
I thought it was.
Yeah, it was. So, if we're going in that direction, we may have to up this goal. Just say that. And as Drew said, I'm willing to jump in, help organize a community effort, whatever it takes. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Collin. I think we really can take this front of mind. This concludes our committee of the whole for our forestry program. Thank you very much.
Need a motion to adjourn.
Can I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.